Well, hey friend, welcome back to another episode. We are on part 2 of my webinar series, helping you show up with confidence and lead webinars in this new era of the online world where people, quite frankly, are a little skeptical and mistrusting in this idea of selling via webinars. Webinars are still an exceptional solution for you being able to solve someone's problem and help them see value in your offer. Be sure to check out last week's episode where I got into the 5 shifts that it was 4 shifts, and I gave you some bonuses that you need to start taking if you want your webinars to perform well in 2022. Gone are the days where you can just follow a webinar script and have people just buy your programs. It isn't relevant. It isn't working in this market. And so if you want to stand out with integrity, with authenticity, and still be really effective, we got to start making some shifts. So in this episode today, we're specifically going to talk about how you can add value for your audience. There's that word. I'm going to talk about that specifically, but how you actually help people get value in a free training so they don't feel like they're coming to a fluffy pitch fest. But how do you also do the value that converts? What I often hear from course creators and coaches is when they're attending webinars, they are so sick of the fluff-free pitch fest. What happens is they swing the pendulum way too far by them then showing up on their webinars, on their free content by teaching so much. Have you ever attended a webinar or a free thing where you think you're getting, like you're signed up for it because the hook really had you, the title of it, and then you get there and it's like 25 minutes of somebody talking about themselves with some fluffy generic training, and then they go into all these testimonials and they pitch you, and it's just, you don't really feel like you walk away with things. In working with my clients and students, I always ask them the question, hey, what do you want people saying at the end of your presentation? What do you want people walking away with? And hands down, the word that comes up all the time is, I want people walking away with tangible things that they can actually do. And that comes from, we are so turned off by like the fluffy pitch fest. I'm going to say that probably a bajillion times on this episode. What we have to remember, we covered this last week, is the idea of just because we have that belief does not mean our audience holds that belief. So we have to challenge that. But we then have to balance this idea as, how do we create tangible, valuable content that serves our audience while respecting that we have businesses? So here is the honest truth, my dear. Like, we are in business. We need to be making money. We are not employees in somebody else's company, just kind of teaching content. That was my old job. Is I was the VP of Learning Development. Our job was to teach content, right? I'm sure I had a comp plan. I don't need to go into those details, but whether or not like what I taught really didn't have a connection to the performance of my job. Like, my job was to show up and teach. So was our teams. Like, it wasn't we got to teach these things to make money. No, we're business owners now, you and I. Like, we have like what we teach. We're not just teachers. That might be what we do in our paid programs, but we are also marketers. We have to help people choose our programs. So it's wearing a different hat. So what we have to respect is when we show up on webinars, when we show up on free content, when we show up on this stuff, we have to be mindful that it is connecting into our programs. It is connecting into our programs. And here's the thing. I think some people feel weird saying that, right? I've read comments in Facebook groups around like, it's clear you're selling. Not about me. I just hear people say that. And here's the thing. I want you to make it very clear to people that you are selling. People should know what your products and services are. They should not be something that's hidden behind a curtain, behind like a webinar in the 11th hour. People should very much know what you do, what you sell. That needs to be normal. Like, we don't walk, like, okay, imagine you are walking down the road of your downtown area and there is a black building with black doors with no lights on and no signs except for, come on in. Would you go in it? No, heck to the no, you would not go in it. Maybe this is a weird metaphor, but this idea is, I think a lot of people think that we shouldn't tell people what's inside. We have to save it for this pitch moment. And I have the opposite belief. I think you should be talking about what you do all the time. Hence why you hear me talk about my clients and my students, and I talk about Speak Up to Level Up, and I talk about working with someone last weekend. I share these things with you because I am reinforcing, hey, I'm a speaking coach. I actually make money doing what I'm doing. I actually have people pay me for it. And hey, by the way, if you ever want to level up your speaking, if you want to create a signature talk, if you want to get better at your webinars, I'm your girl, right? There's no embarrassment. There's no weirdness about that. And if that makes somebody else uncomfortable, they're not my person. See, the thing for me is I want you to feel confident talking about what you do. I want you to feel confident sharing what you do. I want you to feel confident in selling what you do, knowing that it will not be for everyone, but you are a business. You have to have the lights on. We are open all the time. You always have to be selling yourself. And if you're uncomfortable with that, I bet it's because you have compartmentalized in your brain this free content thing. Let me teach. Oop, now let me put on my other hat. It's my sell hat. Now it's time to launch. Now it's time to sell. Now it's time to jump on the sales call. You wear them as two different hats. For me, I got one freaking hat. It's got all the hats in it, but I am wearing that hat all the time. And I will tell you, especially as a woman who has very high opinions and I have high energy, that probably pisses some people off. The fact that I have audacity to talk about my programs, the fact that I have audacity to invite you every single week to join me in my program or to work with me or whatever else, I'm okay with that because I know in the moment where the person who's listening, who needs my help, they're going to be like, thank goodness she invited me. If I'm not constantly making invitations to you or talking about what I do, how could I possibly expect you to come to me when you need help? Should I just like talk about my business in kind of a roundabout way and then in secret be like, I hope they choose me. I hope they hire me. I hope they join my program. I don't know, like that just doesn't work. So if you're hiding behind your pitch, your webinars are probably pretty awkward, my friend. Oh my gosh, I'm just going to call this out and I'm sorry if I offend you or make you uncomfortable on this one. But here's the thing. If you are feeling really uncomfortable and awkward with your webinar pitch, it's because you are feeling awkward and uncomfortable with selling. And let's fix that today because a big challenge that I see so many people making is they compartmentalize the teaching from the webinar. So we're going to dive into what it actually means to create valuable content on a webinar. Hint, it is not just giving away tangible, your best of tips. That is not going to do your audience any favors, and it's definitely not going to lead to conversions for you. So here's what I want you to write down. Well, you don't have to write this down. In the show notes, what I'm about to read you, I have it in the show notes so you can screenshot this to remember it because this is kind of technical and it's kind of you're going to want to hear it a couple times, but I want you to consider this. The secret to creating webinars that actually give you value and convert is remembering this. Your job or the job of your webinar is not to teach. It's to guide your audience to a decision. That decision is whether or not they believe that the solution you provide will help solve their problem. The solution you provide is not your program. It is the approach, method, or system that will get them the results they want, which is most likely the outline of your program. Let me say this again. The job of your webinar is not to teach. It's to help them make a decision. That decision is whether or not they believe that your solution will actually help them solve their problem. And that solution is not your program. It is the method, approach, or system that you teach inside your program. I'm going to break this down and clarify for this, but I want to help you understand here. Decision, solution. The solution is the method or system. And you've probably heard iterations of this before. Let me just clarify on all of this. The big secret for your webinar is not you saying an exact phrase or thing the right way. A lot of people say that, right? They're like, follow this step-by-step thing here, and then you will make all the sales. The problem with that is that it's going to sound inauthentic to you because the person who wrote that script, it's language that works for them. But when you say it, you feel a little awkward and weird. What we have to get better at is understanding how do we actually apply the examples people give us? How do we make this work for our own niche, whatever that damn word is. I don't know. Why is that word so hard? We have to figure out how it works for us and with our people. So I'm going to give you a lot today in today's today's podcast. Today's podcast is going to be like a podcast workshop. We'll call it a pod shop, work pod, whatever you want to call it. So I want you to take notes. And as you're going through this, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I want you to write down notes, not just what I say, but the ideas that you have from what I say. How do you make these ideas your own? because I'm going to give you a lot of details today that, quite frankly, I could make this a paid thing. And some of these elements I have a paid workshop that's called the 10 non-schmucky tactics to selling on webinars. And a couple of these are from that today. But I'm giving you all of this today, not because I want to, right? And it's also the idea of that knowing the information is not going to solve your webinar problem. It's applying the information and figuring out how to unlock it in a way that works for your niche and your audience. So just a side note, I'm going to do a little call out here for a second because I'm working on something very exciting right now. And I want to invite you to it, but I don't have all the details in. But what we don't need is we do not need another how-to step-by-step for how to do a webinar. Because the point is you have access most likely to a ton of webinar templates right now online. Everybody teaches a very similar framework. You can find a webinar template on Creative Market. You can find a webinar template inside. Sal Francis has this incredible membership called the Template Tribe. I'm actually a member. You can get a link in the show notes to get some free resources. But the Template Tribe comes up with all these awesome Canva assets for all of your business visuals. So whether it's social media posts, it could be headers for your Facebook group, engagement posts, it could be it's a whole webinar slide deck in it, and it's awesome. I highly recommend it. The point is, you can get the framework anywhere. I'm not going to teach you the framework for webinars. I'm going to teach you how to use the framework for webinars in a way that actually works for you and your business. So the exciting thing, I'm working on something right now to do for this fall season. It will not be a Black Friday sale, but it'll be around Black Friday, where I'm going to be hosting a webinar intensive for just a handful of entrepreneurs who have a webinar, but it's not really working. They really want to break the mold of the model of say this, then that. They want it to work and they want it to convert and they want it to sound and feel really good that provides value. So if you have a webinar right now that's not converting, if you have a webinar that you can't quite make your messaging work, that you want to improve your story, you want to improve your pitch, but you also want the quality of your content to actually convert. You want the quality of it to really represent the quality of work that you do. If you want some help and to actually get somebody's brain who knows how to create effective webinars to workshop out your specific niche and give you feedback one-on-one and in a group, keep your eye out because we're working on finalizing details for our fall webinar intensive. Never done this before outside of one-on-one clients. So this will be a brand new thing that we're going to try where it's a series of not in person, but workshop-y groups where I'm going to help you get progress on your webinars. So if you're interested in something like that, just send me a message on Instagram. We don't have the page for it, like a lead magnet thing for it. It's going to be such a few thing. I'm going to be offering it to my email list. If you want in or you want more details about it, send me a message over on Instagram because that will be a really great place for you to take the logical framework of a webinar, but actually make it your own. Okay, but let's get into the how do we actually now make this applicable for you? Let's get the information around how do we create webinars that give you value, give your audience value, and help them convert. I had to think here for a moment. Okay, so here we go. There's 5 things that I want. There's 4. There's 4 things I want you challenging yourself on to improve the content on your webinar. 4 specific things. So number 1, I want you to think about being more intentional with what you want your audience thinking through your webinar. Be more intentional what you want your audience thinking as they go through your webinar. Let me give you a quick example here. Years ago, I was listening to one of Don Miller's from the Story Brand, one of his early podcast episodes. And he was sharing this experience where they had this conundrum where they were doing these live in-person Story Brand trainings. And they were going over the workshop survey results. And all the survey results kept saying oh man, I'm overwhelmed. That was a fire hose of information. This was so much. I just, wow, so it's awesome, but there's just a lot. And they were scratching their heads going what's going on? And they went back and listened to the recordings and realized in the beginning of the presentation, when Don welcomed them to the weekend, he was literally saying, oh my gosh, I'm so excited you're here. We put together so much awesome information. We're going to come at you like a fire hose. You're just going to get so much incredible value. You're going to get all this stuff. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have so great. Here we go. He was literally giving them the script to write into the survey. He put that out in the world. It proved to be true. That became the reality. And that's what they wrote in the survey. So they asked the question, okay, what if we how do we change it? Where they asked a good question, which is, what do we want people actually saying on a survey? In an ideal world, if we could write the survey answers ourselves, what would we want people saying? And what they wanted people to say was, this is a lot of information, but we're going to break it down in such a simple system that you're going to be able to keep up with it step by step. That even if you feel overwhelmed in a certain area, trust that you have all the training information. You've got this. Like, you absolutely can tackle this. By the end of this training, you're going to feel excited and enthusiastic, and you're going to have a clear plan. So that's what they wanted people to say. So that's what he added to his opening. And as you can imagine, it worked. I think so often when we are creating content online, we are waiting for people's validation. We're waiting for their feedback. We're waiting for them to buy our program. But instead of just putting stuff out there and hoping that they react well, hoping that they resonate, I want you continually asking the question, how do you want people feeling and what do you want them thinking during and at the end of your presentation? In fact, this is the first question I always ask to all of my clients. As I shared before, my clients want tangible, but they also want people feeling supported and excited and that they believe they can do it. These are all kinds of things we want people to feel. So let me give you some suggestions around thoughts that I want my audience to have as I'm teaching a webinar, and I encourage you to steal these. I call these the 5 heck yes moments to give your audience. And I taught these recently inside the speaking workshops that we had in October, and I want to gift them to you today. So here's 5 things I want you to have your audience thinking when you're speaking to them in the webinar. Number 1, they should be thinking, oh, heck yeah, that's totally me. That's my problem. Number 2, yes, that is what I want. Okay, that's exactly what I want. Yes, you put words exactly to what I want. Number 3, oh, I've never thought about it like that before. Or, oh, okay, yeah, that totally makes sense why this isn't working. Let's see, the next one, number 4, I can finally see how this all works together. Like, oh, I see how we get from here to there. Okay, it's clear now. And number 5, okay, I can totally do this. Like, put that way, I can totally do this. Those are the things you want people saying. Oh, yeah, she gets me. That's my problem. Oh, yes, that is exactly what I'm going after. That's what I want. Oh, I've never thought about that way before. Or now it makes sense why I'm not there yet. Oh, I can see how, okay, I see the path. I see how it all comes together. And yes, heck yes, I can totally do this. That is the experience you need to be working someone through on a webinar in order for it to be easy for them to move forward with you. And if they resonate with your teaching style, they're going to be a heck yes into your program. They're going to be thinking, yes, this is the person that I want to be my mentor to guide me through it. Can you imagine, like, think about this for a moment. Do you see how, if you were being mindful of this, of like, what can I provide someone to help them go, yes, that's exactly what I want? Or what can I provide someone to help them feel like, yes, she pegged me. That's exactly what my problem is. How can you like talk about things that have them go, oh my gosh, like, yeah, that's exactly why this isn't working. I've never thought about it that way before. Hint, context. So you see, I want you to ask these questions for yourself. And I'm not going to give you the script of exactly what to say right now. We can work on that later. But I want you asking yourself more provocative questions like this to really challenge, oh, this is why people are surprised when I start pitching. Or maybe this is why people don't really feel like there's anything valuable there. Because I haven't made it about them and what they could be thinking at every step in the journey. That's your first step. Get more intentional around what you want people to think and feel. And challenge question for you, think about what you typically think and feel when you're on a webinar. Is there any points where you're like, oh, here's the story again? Or, oh, here they go. Be mindful of that so that you don't do that. Like, you honor what you actually want people to think or do there. I'm going to challenge you, workshop this out right now. I would pause the podcast and actually write out, what do I want people thinking or feeling during my webinar? Seriously, write it down. But let's go on to number 2. Okay, how do we help people have more value while remaining effective? This is a biggie. This is going to be a hard truth for you to hear, my friend. Your story has to be about them, not about you. Your story needs to be about them, not about you. One of the number 1 pet peeves that I see people have when it comes to webinars is the long, drawn-out story of the teacher and trainer. Sometimes these things go on for 20 minutes and it is an eternity. Even 10 minutes feels like a freaking eternity on a 1-hour webinar. I know you know what I'm talking about. And the reason why it goes on and on and on forever is because it's not because this person thinks so highly of themselves and they like hearing themselves talk, though that could be true in some instances. But I find that it's actually coming from a very vulnerable space. Let me challenge you on this for a moment. When you started your business, did you have a pretty successful career behind you before you started your business? Or maybe you had a pretty successful other business before you jumped in the online space. And I ask you this question because this is where I was at. I had my career that I had built before I decided to become an entrepreneur. And I have to be honest with you, when I started in the space and realized that I had to start as a nobody, that nobody knew, this is going to sound so hilarious, but like nobody knew how good I was at what I did. Nobody knew about how much I had done what I'd done. Nobody knew about my accomplishments. Nobody knew what I had been through. Nobody knew. So it was like every interaction I had to prove myself. And I felt this need to talk about my accomplishments so that people knew I was legit. And that sounds so hilarious to say, a little embarrassing, but I find this truth so often with entrepreneurs is that we hate being compared to the young whippersnappers who started their Instagram accounts yesterday but are killing it with reels. And we're like, dang it, we can't figure out the freaking reels. But we have business experience and we have all this experience in this area. Like if only people knew that they were hiring a professional. Have you ever felt that, right? So what do? When we get on the webinar, we start delivering our backstory. I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. And it's like all this stuff we pile on because we want to prove that they're not giving their money to some Jill Schmo that just started her business yesterday. This doesn't serve your audience at all. Because honestly, the only thing your audience cares about is, can you solve their problem? Which is why they came to you. That's what they want to know. They also want to check the box, know that you're not a schmuck who just started your business this morning. They want to know that, have you helped people? Have you gotten them results? And specifically, how can you help me? That is the question. So your signature story should be the story of your struggle and solution around why you do, I just hit my microphone, why you do what you do now. Getting very animated with my hand gestures. If you're watching the video today, I am just very passionate about this, is that you have to remember why you're telling the story. Are you telling it to prove that you're an expert? Or are you telling it to connect with your audience and serve them? That's the big question. So if you want your webinar to be more valuable right out of the gate, fix your freaking story. You need to learn how to tell your signature story in a way that serves your audience. If you want to learn more about that, you can start with my podcast episode around signature story. We will link to it in the show notes. But this will be a huge part of what we do inside the webinar intensives here later this fall to help you craft a story that actually serves your audience in a way that connects to your product and program. But start at that point of saying, why am I telling this story and what am I including? Number 3, how do you help make this more valuable and more effective? Remember, what you teach in your webinar must align with the promise of your program. We have to make sure that what we're teaching is the right thing. And I'll challenge you with this. What I see so often when people bring me their broken webinars and they say, Heather, help me, it's not working. The first place I look at is their teaching section. And most likely they're using a template where in the teaching section, it is the 3 secrets to helping you blank, the 5 pillars of blankety blank. I don't know. It's usually one of those things, like the 3, 4, 5 things that something. And I taught in this way before, but I knew that what you teach here has to be the right thing that aligns. So remember before that I said that what we have to focus on is them believing that your solution can actually help them solve the problem. That's what's important. And the solution isn't your program. The solution is the method that you teach. So what we have to focus on is in the teaching part of the webinar, one of the main things we have to teach is the method or system or solution to the problem. And it doesn't mean that you're going to teach it all in detail, but you have to show them how it all goes together. So I'll give you an example for me. One of the things I teach in my webinar, and just note, I'm not giving these things in order, so please do not try to take what I'm teaching today and lay out the order of your webinar. These are things, there's a specific way to do webinars, but one of the places in my webinar that I teach my formula, which is called the Magnetic Talk Formula. There's 4 specific things that will help you become more magnetic. It's the having more purpose with when you're speaking. It's the structure of your talk. It's the stories that you tell, and it's the style. It's how you deliver it. Those 4 things together is what helps you become more magnetic. I walk through that. You could call those my 4 pillars if you would, but I teach those, but I make sure that that is the quote unquote solution that my audience believes that to become more magnetic, these are the 4 things to focus on. And that directly aligns with what I teach inside Speak Up to Level Up. We go into those 4 areas: the purpose, the structure, the story, and the style. So I align those things. It is not new information. Now, what I teach under that, do I teach everything under the sun? No, but I help them understand that the elements for becoming more magnetic are those 4 things. Really, really, really important. Now, here's the thing. I am able to do this because I know my audience struggles with confidence. I know they struggle with second guessing what they say. They struggle with over teaching. They struggle with giving away too much, but not asking for the sale. I know my audience wants a structure that helps them present their ideas in a way that resonates and serves their audience and sells their program without doing the in-your-face selling or without doing the awkward, now it's time to sell. It's all seamless. The solution that I sell is this. When you create and deliver a signature talk to the right audience on the right stages, your message is magnetic. Selling becomes easier. That is the promise of my program. That is the principle of my entire business, that when you create and deliver a signature talk to the right audience on the right stages, your message becomes magnetic. Therefore, selling becomes easier. Therefore, video becomes easier. Therefore, speaking to people becomes easier. All these things kind of cascade from that. So the solution that I sell is the idea of a signature talk and becoming magnetic. So what I teach in my webinar helps people understand what exactly that looks like. There's no let me teach you, let me give you an example here. I don't teach you here's the 3 ways to get better on Facebook Live. And then be and join my program for how to speak on stages and sell your programs. It's not aligned. It's a little tiny piece of it, but it does not give the context and the bigger picture for how speaking shows up in your world. Thinking about this, how this applies to your topic, ask yourself the question of, is what I'm teaching in the webinar actually aligned to what I am teaching them? Or is it some abstract topic? What you teach in your webinar must align with the promise of your program. Which brings me to what I think is the most important piece of your webinar. So this, in my opinion, is where you really create value and you get conversion. And that is this. You must address the objections to your solution in your webinar before you teach it. So I'm not talking about objections to buying your program. I'm not talking about how much time is this going to take? Am I going to get a return on my investment? Can I take a test drive? Not those frequently asked questions that are all kind of BS. I'm talking about the objections your person has around your solution. So let's say here, let's say you and me, my solution is teaching you how to develop a signature talk. Well, one of the objections my audience has is going, I'm not ready for that yet. I'm still trying to figure out my program, or I'm still trying to figure out how to do my webinar, or I'm still working on X, Y, and Z. That's an objection. Well, I have to focus on how do I help my audience understand that speaking is something that we're already doing in our businesses, and it's not a later kind of thing. It's you're already doing it, you may as well do it on purpose kind of thing. And you might be familiar with that language because you hear me say it all the time. It's overcoming objections. What other objections do people have for your solution? Why are people saying, yeah, but I'm not ready for that? Or yeah, no, but that's not going to work. Or yeah, maybe you teach Instagram. Yeah, I've tried Instagram, but I just don't want to post every single day. Okay, maybe one of the things is you bust the myth that they have to post on every single day. You need to be bashing objections to your solution on your webinar. If you hear nothing from me, hear this. What are the solutions that your audience has? Did I just say that wrong? What are the objections that your audience has to your solution? What are the objections that your audience has to your solution? If you do not know those, that is your homework assignment. What are the objections they're having? Why are they not, I'm not talking about your program. I'm talking about the solution at which you teach. And if you don't know the difference between those things, we'll dig into that a little bit more another day. But you see the difference. So like for me, my solution is helping people to develop the signature talk. My method, how I do that, is through the magnetic talk formula. My program in which I do that all together is Speak Up to Level Up. So I'm not talking about the objections to Speak Up to Level Up. I'm talking about the objections to, but I don't need a signature talk because I'm not speaking on stages. But I don't need to do that yet because I'm not going out to be a professional speaker. Do you hear what I'm doing there? The objections to the solution, not the program. I want you to journal out what comes to mind for you on this. What are some of those pieces? And then ask yourself, am I actually addressing those on the webinar? Because if you are not, people will not be a yes to your program. Now, here's the thing. Me educating you around the idea that a stage is simply a platform to share your message. You're talking to people every single day. The idea of when you overteach, you actually overwhelm your audience. Your job isn't to teach, it's to help them form a decision. All of that is what's called like belief shifting. And what you'll notice is sometimes the beliefs that people challenge you on, or the quote unquote mindset stuff, some of it feels really fluffy. But when you anchor it down in real objections that people have, real struggles or mistakes they're having, real things that they're challenged with, like the examples I gave you today, when you start shifting that, that's where you make that quote unquote fluffy stuff more tangible. I don't want you to skip the fluffy stuff. I want you to scoop the fluff out and actually get to the meat. That was the weirdest thing I've ever said on the podcast, but I hope you follow what I'm saying there. I don't want you to throw out this idea of, oh, I'm just going to jump to the training because I don't do fluff. Then don't do fluff. Find out what the objections are, and then you need to bash those objections. Help them understand why that's the case. Oh my gosh, I have given you so many great things to think about. And the goal here isn't, right, to go figure out how to do all these things. The goal is to provoke your thinking to say, what's one or two things I can take from today's episode to improve my webinar right now? So let's recap what those were. Number one, ask yourself, how can I be more intentional? What are my people thinking when they're going through my webinar? How can I get them going, yeah, she gets me. Yeah, okay, this is what I want. Oh, okay, I've never thought about this before, i.e. objection bashers. Okay, I see how this all fits together, i.e. your method or system. Oh, I can totally do this. The simplicity of your system. When they resonate with your teaching style, then it becomes easy and like a, hey, and if you resonate with what I'm teaching, here's how we can go further with this. Here's how you can apply this together, or how we can do this together. That's how you start thinking about the thinking, and that's how you can start making sure your webinar is on the right track. Remember, make your story about them, not about you, which sounds a little weird because it is about you. But what I mean by that is you need to edit out the things that are really irrelevant for them. How do you focus on the parts of your story that mesh up with the problem and solution you were talking about in that webinar that day? Number three, remember that your webinar must align with the promise of your program. So if you're teaching an abstract random topic and you're wondering why you're not converting, there's your answer. Number four, you must address the objections your audience has to your solution. So let's say here, if you're let's say a fitness coach and you focus on paleo eating for new moms, I don't know, this is a very specific thing, you're going to have to banish the objections around like, I don't have time for paleo. You have to think about like, what are the objections that they're going to have, or how are they going to be resistant to that solution? Even though they're kind of interested, right? They're still going to have resistance. You can think about, let's see another one here. Let's say that you teach, let's say that you teach photographers how to increase the pricing of their services. Well, one of the objections, they like the idea of increasing the pricing for their services, but deep down the objection they have is I don't know that I can actually do that. I don't think that's going to work for my market. I don't believe that I actually can charge that much. Like, what I'm going to have to do to be worth that much money, I just don't have time for. Do you see what I'm doing right here? I'm thinking about what they might be thinking about the idea of the promise. And do not confuse, just because somebody signs up to your webinar does not mean they're totally bought into the solution that you solve. You got to make your case. You got to help them understand and believe that, okay, this is possible for them. They have to understand why what they're doing right now isn't working. Okay, I hope that these thoughts today have gotten you thinking a bit. Maybe if you have that webinar and it's not quite working, these are the kinds of things that I would start thinking about. Remember, this is a 3-part series. So if you missed last week's episode, why don't you jump to it right now, where we talk about some of the shifts that you need to be making if you want to be relevant in webinar selling here in the next year in this new market. Next week, we're going to jump into some of my recommendations for how you can show up for a webinar more prepared by using scripting without sounding scripted or using a script for the whole thing. Because I'm a huge advocate of saying scripting is not it's not the selling solution. Other people say that you should script and you should practice enough where you're like an actor to be able to use your script. I'm just not, I don't believe it. I think that if you really want to authentically sell, you got to know your product, you got to know your person, you got to know your program, but you should know where to script so you don't go off the rails, go off on a bunch of tangents, and you spend way too long on your webinar when you could accomplish it in a short amount of time. So I'm going to teach you where to script, how to do it in a way that's going to resonate with your audience. So I'll see you in next week's episode.